that conceptual Brahman is described as 4, 5, and 6 of the first generation. This is after Vyasa, the vast transformation culture, he is considered. And because he is considered, he is not lost. Krishna arranges the helping address this satisfaction. And that is it's so that we provide something that's to be glorified. And those are the instructions that are given. And after these instructions, so at the end of this chapter, in the 7th chapter, the beginning describes that Vyasa sits down in meditation. And that Samadhina meditation. Actually, that's what one else does. So in Samadhi, meditate on the expert technical and then when he sits down and meditates, the 7th chapter of the first canto, there are 4 voices which he was always to the others. They are conceptuals of the heart. So, I'm going to use other instructions, and there are 4 verses which are basically passage. There is Siva, Maya, which is the last one. So, we call it that Maya, and then the Jivas are the and Jivas in the means from the operator and the Bhava. The means for you is the Bhava. These 4 verses are like the conceptual sphere of Bhava. So, while describing this conceptual of the Bhava, this is one of the key verses. Naradi has observed the aspects of various subjects. However, he is not connected to subjects. So, now if you consider there are knowledge, other subjects like Jyotish. These are not bad. They are not directly emotional. They are very important. They are not emotional. So, now if you go to the numbers of the you need to make them really represented in such a way that they contribute to the glorification. And so, Prabhupada thinks that he and what he does that he looks at the modern branches of knowledge. So at that time, this is philosophy over there. And this is philosophy at that part of the somewhere in a single chapter. Jyotish cosmology is a single chapter. It's a particular kind of thing. And she is also teaching how to but now what Prabhupada is doing is what are the branches of knowledge? How they can be used to glorify God. That Uttam Shloka Gunam Uttam Shloka is God. And these qualities can be described. So we focus on the topic of science and how to glorify Krishna through science. So I take this in 3 broad parts. First is we talk about the need for this. The second is the challenges for this. And the last one is the avenues. So let's begin with this. So broadly we can say the audiences can be divided into 2 categories. When we talk about wisdom, we share. There are insiders and there are outsiders. So insiders are coming and outsiders are those. But not necessarily devotional meditation. You have various levels. But at one level, in terms of concept, insider and outsider are broad categories. is always messy. Taxonomy is a branch of knowledge. So you know what is taxonomy? Too much tax for the brain. You know what is taxonomy? Taxonomy is basically a system of classification. Any system of classification, at the concept level it is very clear. But at the ground level, it is quite complex. Like you may say, now we are Bengal, so you consider the map. So on a map, it's very smooth. This is India, and this is Bangladesh. This is Nepal, this is Bhutan, this is China. Now if you actually go over there, there is no neat line demarcating this is India and this is Bangladesh. In fact, cartographers, they say that the India-Bangladesh boundary is the messiest boundary among all boundaries in the world. Because what has happened is, that I think before the remapping was done some time ago, that inside Bangladesh, there were some areas which belong to India. And in the areas that belong to India within Bangladesh, within those areas, there are some areas that belong to Bangladesh. So, because some people are in India also. So there is no need dividing boundary. So real life is messy. Systems of classification, conceptually, everybody clear. But factually, classification is not that easy. So now insider outsider is not that important. There are insiders to different degrees, and there are outsiders to different degrees. Like if you say somebody is a Western person who has never heard the word Krishna. That is one level of outside.
माइक से निकल के सर सर्कल कर रहा है ना तो सर्कल
That's another level of outside. So there was one American TV show where they asked, what is the most ridiculous thing you have ever heard in your life? And one of the common answers that was given was, not the top answer, but one of the common answers given was 1980s. That do I need to repeat what I have spoken till now? Okay. So one of the common answers was that, okay, what is the most ridiculous thing that we have heard? That a Hare Krishna monk approaches us and tells us that a bluish black cowherd boy is God. So that they consider the most ridiculous thing. So we can say outsiders are to different degrees. So rather than it's like a rigid category, it's a spectrum. That's why you see the yellow color, the yellow color and the blue color, and shading. So now, if somebody is a complete insider, so they have a taste for the Bhagavatam, they have taste for Chaitanya Charitamrita. For them, there may be absolutely no need for glorifying Krishna through science. They already have faith in Krishna. In fact, they will just feel its annoyance, its distraction. Instead of speaking about Krishna, why are you speaking about all these subjects? And that's true. However, if somebody wants to share Krishna Bhakti with others, then in today's world, because most people are scientifically minded, actually, most people are not scientifically minded, most people think that they are scientifically minded. Science is itself very complicated actually. And far more people believe that they are scientific than they are actually scientific. So, but because people think that they are scientific, so there is a need for effective outreach. That we need to be present to present Krishna Bhakti in a scientific. That's why those involved in outreach need to have some basic understanding of science. And then there's for somebody who is, there's this word fence sitter. A fence sitter is neither inside nor outside. They are practicing, but for them, if a scientific rational presentation is given, that can deepen their faith, that can strengthen their conviction. Yeah, this makes sense. So personally for me, in my childhood, I used to read a lot of books on science. And one of my dreams was to become an astrophysicist. So I read a lot of biographies of scientists, and not just like personal biographies, the conceptual evolution biographies. So when I read the book Origins is a magazine which was prepared by devotee scientists in the 1980s, and that was, you could say, a knockout blow for me. Or whatever skepticism, nihilism, atheism was there within me, was just knocked out by that. So it deepens one's faith. But then beyond that, so now there may be people who may still be outsiders, but scientific outreach can increase the prestige. Prestige means it's like, no, somebody may be a general Hindu. They say, oh no, we have Hindu scientists also. No, we have Vedic math. We have this Vedic. Many Indians brag about Vedic math. Many more Indians brag about Vedic math than actually practice Vedic math. So, like that. It's needed to increase prestige. And then, those who are complete outsiders, those who are opposed, they may even ridicule it. You fools. You worship a stone idol as if it is God. Can't you see the stone is insentient? Then, now, a rational presentation is required to avoid ridicule. So basically, there could be different audiences, and for different audiences, there may be a different degree of necessity. For those who are outsiders, now not all outsiders are equally scientifically minded, but for some outsiders who are reasonably well educated, for them it may be vital. Without that, they may not be able to connect at all. So, with this broad understanding, now that there can be different audiences. So now let's try to look at how the scientific approach can be utilized. So we could say that there are 4 broad demographics. There are insiders. So when I put insider twice, there are insiders who are very well educated about the tradition. They're intellectual, they're philosophical, they're learned. That's the top over here. And then there are outsiders also. There are outsiders also who are intellectual, they are learned, they are scholarly. And then there are insiders who may not be so intellectual, not so well read, they may not be that rational. So, and then there are outsiders also like that. In general, so here when I put insiders at the top, what I mean, these are more insiders and outsiders, both are Brahmanically oriented. In any society, the Brahmanas are always in a minority. Now we may say, if somebody is not a devotee, can they be a Brahmana? Well, what I mean is, one aspect of Brahmanical nature is love for books, love for study, love for understanding. And there are many people who may not be practicing bhakti, but they have that. Love for study, love for understanding, love for intellectual growth. So that's what we are referring to as outsiders. So now, at one level, when we think of communication is insider to outsider. So that is outreach. The word we sometimes use the word preaching, but the word preaching has significant negative connotations. It has the connotation that you are holier than thou. You are ignorant, you are immoral, I am enlightened and I am moral, and I am speaking down to you. So that because of that Christian holier than thou connotation, so generally nowadays we don't use the word preaching, we use the word outreach. So insider to outsider. So for example, we have the Discover Yourself course. Different places there may be journey of self-discovery. Different places they have different courses. So that the purpose of the insider to outsider communication is one thing. In one sense, it is to inspire outsiders to become insiders. To inspire outsiders to start practicing bhakti, then they will become insiders. And now, if that happens, then what is there? Another mode of communication is insider to insider, where some outsider who has become insider, now they want to learn more about the tradition. Then we have courses like Bhakti Shastri, yeah, Bhakti Vaibhav. So Bhakti Shastri, study the Bhagavad Gita systematically. Another books to study systematically. So for example, generally the Bhagavatam class, this will be what, insider to insider or insider to outsider? Yes, insider to insider. That's why the mode itself is we are starting with a verse, we are reciting Sanskrit, we are reciting prayers. Now, if we are doing a program for a new audience, insider to outsider, we may not start with Sanskrit. Of course, if there is a respect for Sanskrit in the outside audience, that is fine. But otherwise, it may not be. So the format itself is quite insider over. So there is insider to insider, which helps develop a deeper knowledge of Krishna, greater attraction to Krishna. Now, apart from that, there is one important mode of communication which is often neglected. That is outsider to outsider. So outsider to outsider means what is the social awareness of outsiders? What do outsiders think about us? So for example, now in India, bhakti is like a is like a lived tradition. Everybody has an experience of bhakti since our childhood. But in the West, if somebody sees a Hare Krishna person distributing books or dancing in the streets, who are you Hare Krishna people? They will immediately Google, they'll go to Wikipedia and they will read on Wikipedia. Now, Wikipedia is not written by insiders. Now, Wikipedia is there. In the past, inside Britannica, Encyclopedia, and others were there. So, those are written by outsiders who are scholars or are scholarly. So, if some I don't know how many of you does anyone of here as a hobby edit Wikipedia entries? No. Okay. Edit Wikipedia. Wikipedia is a encyclopedia which can be edited by anyone. So it's like a hobby among Western youth that I have edited. It's like I have edited 10,000 Wikipedia pages. So it's like a matter of it's a intellectual hobby over there. So what happens is, of course, you cannot just write anything on Wikipedia. You have to give references from established mainstream published sources. But the point is that lot of people are going to learn about bhakti, learn about Bhagavad Gita, learn about Krishna from this channel, outsider to outsider. And this is for three reasons. First is the insider to outsider reach is not very huge. Now we may have our websites where we may krishna.com, iskon.com or whatever. And there we may describe about Krishna, we may describe about bhakti. But what is the reach of that website as compared to Wikipedia or other encyclopedias? So first, insider to outsider reach is not a lot. Second is that the insider to outsider outreach is often regarded with certain level of skepticism. Because it's like if you want to buy a laptop, suppose somebody wants to buy an Apple laptop. Then if they go to the Apple site, they'll all be speaking good only about that laptop. They are not going to speak anything negative about that. That's why people when they want to buy a product, they will go to some reviewers who are neutral. Now, of course, very few reviewers are actually neutral. Most of these reviewers, they also get some payment for if people buy from their links and their products. That doesn't mean they're biased. But the idea is, if somebody is speaking about themselves, there will be a certain level of suspicion about it. So, insider to outsider, people may not trust it. And third is, sometimes insiders may lack the language, may lack the terminology, the concepts by which outsiders can understand. Every tradition has its own insider terms, and those insider terms are not very understandable for outsiders. So because of that, what happens is that terminology may come in the way of outsiders understanding what we are doing. So for example, as devotees, we may use certain terms. For example, we use the word transcendental. Now, it's not a very common word outside. Most of us as devotees, we learn Krishna Bhakti by reading Srila Prabhupada's books. And Srila Prabhupada wrote his books in English, and he learned his English in the 1920s. 1920s, when he was in college, 1910, 1920, he learned English. And when Prabhupada wrote his books, primarily in the 1960s, by that time itself, the 1910, 1920 English was old. And now in 2020, the English is very different. So Prabhupada sometimes uses the word, the cult of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is spreading all over the world. Now, today, if somebody asks me, are you Hare Krishna the cult? What will we say? Yes? No. Because at that time, when Prabhupada used the word cult, it had a very neutral connotation. Cult simply meant a group of people. But now it means a close group of people where people where leaders are indoctrinate people and manipulate people and exploit people. That's the idea of cult. So we cannot use the same word exactly. So language keeps changing. The Catholic Church has a body of scholars who retranslate the Bible every 25 years. The same word they keep retranslating because language changes. So, because of these three reasons, the insider to outsider may not reach all outsiders. That's why there's outsider to outsider. And we may say we don't care, but we do have to care because we live in a world that is prominently filled by outsiders. So, what people who are not practicing bhakti think about bhakti and bhaktas is important for us. If we want to do Rath Yatra and we want to get permission, and if the mainstream society thinks that we are questionable people, like Maharaj was telling yesterday that when Hare Krishna devotees came to India, at that time because of geopolitical tension between India and Pakistan, Indians were suspicious of India had aligned with the USSR. The Cold War was there, so Indians were suspicious of Americans. So we may say we devotees we don't care for geopolitics. But we may not care for politics. We may not be interested in politics, but politics is interested in us. Politics impacts us. So what happens is this does affect. So how society perceives us does matter. When the devotees came to India from the West, there was a huge disconnect between the popular response to devotees and the governmental response to devotees. Because while the government had adopted socialist ideology and they were largely, if not atheistic, at least non-theistic, but Indians were still very pious. And that's why at the popular level, when Srila Prabhupada came to India, there was such an amazingly welcoming response. Indians were delighted, they were astounded. Oh, these Western people are practicing bhakti. They are wearing dhoti kurta, they are wearing saris, they are chanting Hare Krishna. And this is a great cultural triumph for us. We were ruled by the Western people in the past. Now, these Western people are adopting our culture, our wisdom, our practices. So, strategically also, Bhaktisivana Thakur didn't emphasize, Bhaktisivana Thakur himself would sometimes wear shirt pant. Even when he went to Radha Kund at one time in Vrindavan, he wore shirt pant and the Prabhupada had this strategy of attracting Westerners to India, or attracting Indians to Indian wisdom through Westerners. And that's why for that strategy, the cultural aspect was very important. Many other Indian leaders also went to the Indian spiritual leaders went to the West and they got some Western followers. But they did not emphasize the cultural aspect much. So yeah, Western people became disciples of this guru or that guru, but they continued wearing Western dress and they had a Western lifestyle. So they may have been adopting Indian wisdom, but the wisdom that somebody adopts is not very easily seen. Somebody adopts culture that is seen much more easy. So Prabhupada emphasized culture also for strategic purposes. But the point I'm making is, it's a whole different discussion. The point here is that there is this outsider to outsider communication which impacts us. So when a devotee learns about science, okay, let me conclude with this before we move forward. And the fourth mode of communication is outsider to insider. Now we may say, why do we need to learn anything from outsiders? Now we are going to teach outsiders. Well, yes, that may be true at one level. But along with that, it is that there are certain subjects which are studied by outsiders. So, for example, as if we want to say talk about reincarnation, and we say reincarnation is such a convincing, persuasive concept, but why doesn't mainstream education adopt it? Then for that we may have to know, okay, how does the mainstream world think about reincarnation? Now, what is the attitude of toward reincarnation of this religious tradition or that religious tradition or this thought system or this national nation's intellectual ethos? So if you want to reach to a large number of people, so there's social awareness. That means how people think about us, and awareness of social awareness. That means we need to know how people view us. We need to know how people think about us. So Tamal Krishna Maharaj, as Maharaj mentioned yesterday in his class, he was one of the most prescient preachers. Prescient means far-sighted, one who sees the future in advance. So he recognized that our Western outreach had reached a plateau. That we were reaching out to some Western people, but not many Western people were interested. And Maharaj said that we need to study the Western thought systems to understand how they think, and then present bhakti wisdom. In the first generation of ISKCON, what happened is there were people who had already disillusioned. That means they were already disenchanted with Western culture, Western education, Western politics, Western religion, and they were already looking for some alternative, and they were very easily attracted because Prabhupada offered them attractive alternative. But what about people who are not that disenchanted, not that disillusioned? If we have to present our wisdom to them, then we have to understand their mainstream school of thought. So now this outsider to insider cannot be done by everyone. It needed to be done by everyone. It has to be done by a very specific number of people. So why am I talking about outsider to insider? Because that is in some ways relevant for scientific outreach. Say, just to give a straightforward example, if we say that the soul exists, and how do you say the soul exists? Because the Bhagavad Gita says. Okay, we may quote this to an insider and that will work. But if you quote this to outsider, what will happen is that you are making one questionable claim and you are using a questionable source to support a questionable claim. Now, who believes in the Bhagavad Gita? So what happens is every social group has its own sources of authority, and we cannot expect another social group to accept our sources of authority. So if there is to be communication between two social groups, then there has to be either a mutually accepted source of authority, or the two groups have to look at each other's source of authority and see where the two intersect. So in today's world, one major source of authority is science. So for outsider, the source of authority is science. For insider, the source of authority is scripture. So if we are to use science to glorify Krishna, now to some extent we need to study science. And if you have to study science,